going to ask for radio silence for just a second while I pause the recording. We'll restart that in 25 seconds once we've got everybody up and running. Привет, Rossiyskaya Svet Работов, greeting the Russian botnets in their native language. We're glad you tuned into the live stream today from social. If you'd like to actually join the real meeting today, scan the QR code that I'm going to put on the screen right now, and that will take you over to the website where you can register and get on. With that, we've got our attendees rolling in. We're going to kick off here in about 30 seconds. Who's in our audience today? I see Alexandra. I haven't talked to you in years. Austin, Marie, hey, Sarah, Terry. Glad you made it, Terry. You're going to make a great interlocutor here with our guest today. You're going to love him. Craig Fleischer's in the crowd. Hey, Craig, how you doing? All right, I think we have enough to call it a quorum. I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and then Derek, take us away in 3, 2, 1.
Greetings, everybody. Running into the Fog, episode 48. Eric, how are you today?
I am living the dream, my brother.
Yeah, I like that shirt, and I know it's got a story somewhat relevant to our guest today, so I won't bury the lead, but I'll let you bring that out here in a minute. We welcome Mr. Bill Hoffman, longtime friend, industry leader, recognized consultant, internal executive, all things from here to there involved. And Bill, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you guys very much. Apologies for the hotel room backdrop here. I'm down at the Gartner conference presented yesterday. Much more excited, honestly, to be with you guys today. It was good, but this is always a really inspiring conversation, especially when it's not just presenting, but having a conversation and two-way dialogue. So let's keep that going throughout the conversation today, folks, and I appreciate the chance to be with everyone today.
That Gartner conference is in Orlando, I think it was, right?
Yes, I am a Disney file though, so that's a good thing. I'm going to hit Epcot a little bit once today is done and check out the worlds and the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. If people haven't been on it, I was here 2 weeks ago too, and it's amazing. It's the best ride I've ever been on. So Disney knows how to do it right.
Cool.
I love it.
So Bill, you have a really diverse background. You've been at one of the nation's biggest banks. You've been at one of the nation's most recognized, Big Four consulting agencies. You've been in government intel. You've spent some time now, on the private consulting side. Let's start by sharing with our guests joining into this podcast a little bit about Bill Hoffman. What you've done throughout your career, kind of what motivates you. I know there's an element of your past that was motivated by 9/11. Would love to hear you kind of bring that out and share that with our guests today. I'll just kind of let you take over.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Derek, for the chance to share a bit of the background. So I actually began my professional career at the CIA. Started there actually during college when I was 18 and 1 week old. I was technically a full-time employee. It was a kind of a ROTC-like program they had for a period of time. So I went from Perkins as a waiter to that job, which was pretty weird. But it was amazing. And I was there for 7 years, and I learned a lot about the power of good decision-making. And unfortunately, what happens when people don't get the right information at the right time and the bad consequences that happen. And I would say that experience has substantially shaped my private sector career, both on the buy side and the business, as well as consultants, because I think when I thought about this a lot, like fundamentally bad decision making just pisses me off. Like it's so upsetting to see people make bad decisions with, many times they have the information and they still make a bad decision. Often because of biases and other factors, or they don't have it, and that's a fault of one of their peers or someone on their team. Usually it's not a willy-nilly bad decision. It's solvable. And that's fun. Like helping people make good decisions is like, it literally gives me goosebumps. I'm not kidding. I'm kidding right now. That's weird. So I started at the agency and then found my way through into the private sector. Was at McKinsey for 2 tours, led analytics at US Bank as well as Best Buy. And now I have Tradecraft, a company that helps other companies build their functions out and does world-class analytics work for them. And it's really about that kind of intersection of information, insights, analytics, and enabling good decision-making. and the power of great things that happen. And I think that's to me, the most significant differentiator for any company is their ability to quickly act upon the external factors and forces shaping, and hence Aurora, WTC, and all the work you guys have done. I mean, you're right in the sweet spot of that, and that's why it's been fun to know you guys for 15 years now, I think.
Not long enough, and Bill, I'll just say we got to get together and have a beer, man, and just catch up on this whole pandemic stuff. This social distancing thing is over with, and we've got some interlocutors up to join our panel here in the back half. I want to explain real quick a kind of a fun feature that we've got for those of you streaming on social. Scan the QR code you see on your screen right now to get over and register. Because you'll want to tell us who you are and potentially join the panel here in the second half. We've got a first half. We call this first half unthinkable, Bill. We want people to think thoughts that they maybe wouldn't have thought without you and your influence on. The second half is called unspeakable, and that means that we cut the social folks free, and you can do all the cussing and swearing and whatever else you want to say, because Mark Zuckerberg is not going to know what we're talking about. So that's our format for today. Bring up our POAP for unthinkable, awesome. Would William behind the scenes, and scan away, everybody. But Bill, tell us a little bit about sort of that action process. I know that seems to be really you as an intelligence professional, I think, really exemplify the no action, no traction motto that I've lived by here for the last year or two. And, this shirt actually I wear in honor of your naval service, because one of the mottos, I think, of the Navy SEALs is speed, surprise, and violence of action. And violence of action doesn't necessarily mean that you're just going to kill everybody in the room, although you might have to, but it means commitment to a course of action that is going to be seen through until the mission is accomplished. And we've got dozens of examples of that, I think, from the type of military service that you've been a part of as well. Let's talk about actionability a little bit. And as we get our interlocutors recruited here, I'll be doing that kind of in the background. Talk to me about action and then the failure to act.
Perfect. Yeah. So 2 points,
which so often I think leads to the types of mistakes you're.
Yeah, 2 points on that front. The first is, I think about analytics or insights or anything that's supporting decision making. Unless someone is taking an action off of it, it's completely not valuable. Like a lot of analytics folks just love the craft of their work, and I appreciate their craft too. But if it's just a deliverable that doesn't get used or benefit a stakeholder or a broader group, then its value is negligible, if not zero. So for me, I love the balance of action t-shirt. I mean, our whole mantra is about driving insights into actionable business outcomes. And what I think that shirt speaks to is that the challenges that we're facing with data and analytics today, and according to Gartner down here and the IDC as well, Forrester, 90% of investments in analytics and big data projects have been failing. And the reason they're failing is people are asking the wrong question. They're solving it with more data and analytics. And what they really need to realize that it's the change management problem. And to execute successfully that shirt, that's change management. That's how do you get human beings to want to use, to get curious about the right questions. And so building that kind of analytics operating model to be able to drive from the final analytics deliverable, or even getting there with best in class, to an outcome, that last 10 feet, whatever you want to call it, that's what people are really trying to solve for now. Not just more data. It's like, we need some action off of this. And back to the Navy analogy, one of my most, I think, one of the best prescient comments I've heard from folks, and you guys have said many yourself, was from the former CNO of the Navy. So basically the kind of the key real person, not the Secretary of the Navy, but the actual military person leading the Navy. And someone asked him, why is the Navy always involved in all of these high profile, the Bin Laden thing, whatever you want to call it. It's like, you guys just seem to get there so fast. And he said, no, that's not it. The speed is not from being fast. It's from already being there. They're forward deployed. So it's they're right there. And I think that's very interesting when it comes to analytics or insights. How do you have your functions have a forward deployed presence into the business? So you know what the right questions are, will be a sequence and prioritization of those questions, to make sure your folks are working on the right stuff, because oftentimes they're off in an ivory tower and then, they produce stuff that no one uses. big surprise. You don't know what matters, right? So that kind of forward deployed thinking, the Navy has that right. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from not just the Navy, all branches, for private sector companies from those experiences.
Well, and one of the things we've talked about before is the difference between predictive analytics and palliative analytics, the analytics that make you feel more comfortable while you're dying, as opposed to predictive analytics that allow you to direct resources and then put those resources where they're going to have a yield.
Yeah, it's a great point. I would say, unfortunately, 60 to 70% plus of the effort most analytics or insights teams are spending today is validating a pre-existing point of view of a senior executive or someone in the business that matters, rather than discovery or validation or test and learn or innovation. So that idea that you need to move from descriptive to prescriptive in a way that actually isn't just validating the existing point of view, but challenging it in the right way. Like, you don't want to just always be the naysayer group either. You have to know how to play the human elements of this a bit. But it's really key to be able to do that. And most companies need to shift their resources, which typically are 70, 80%, looking at what is happening or has happened, and flip the model to focusing 70 to 80% on what will or should happen. And that transition, to me, is what, if you look at analytics companies or companies that are really distinctive in analytics or insights broadly, and I think you guys are talking about those clients, like that transition is the key. Like, how do we get people thinking about not just current and past, but what future should be and how to shape it, which is still very shapeable for many of our clients.
Bill, when you think about the relationship capital required to go and ask someone to be forward deployed. In other words, you're asking for resources and you're saying, this is my best case analysis around what 70, 80% looks like of what should happen, right? How do you take great analysis like that paired with relationship capital? Maybe it's in the form of the currency known as trust, right? How do you pair the two in order to convince senior leaders? If you're sitting on this podcast as a intelligence manager or director, responsible for getting leaders to actually drive insights to action and actually take some action, how do you pair trust and that forward deployment mindset and skill set together to do good things?
That's a great question. To me, I love the Open Recon logo you guys have, and I think trust is the juice that makes it spin, and it's what makes the ability for an individual as well as a function to be able to do exactly what you said, Derek, to help people be forward-looking as well as forward-thinking. So for me, a great learning, and that came from actually Mike Ray, who I think you guys may know. He's at Best Buy leading our competitive intelligence function. And I remember having a conversation with him about 90 days in, where I was leading the consumer insights unit, our analytics and research functions. And I just said to Mike, I'm just spending all my time at there's this place called the Hub at Best Buy where it's like, there's a caribou there and everyone just hangs out. Like, I'm like not doing any work. I'm spending all my time meeting people at the Hub. And he said, no, that is the work. And that was very, very insightful. If I hadn't done that and built those relationships, I would have never been able to make recommendations or have a team feel good about making recommendations. So you have to build that trust, both as an internal employee of a big company as well as now in the consulting space. Same thing. Like, you have to build that trust. It's a lot harder. I thought it would be a lot harder not being able to do that in person. I think that was a hypothesis that has been disproven, interestingly. A little harder, but not crazy harder. But the idea that you have to have those conversations, and it brings back a quote from Drucker, which is another kind of cornerstone for our thinking. He says the problem with management teams today is that they have all the answers, but they have all the questions wrong. And what are the right questions? What do your internal constituents really want to know? It changes, on a weekly, if not daily basis sometimes. Like, if you aren't having a relationship with people and an open one, then, you're not going to know what the right things to work on are.
Yeah, I think that asking the right questions is the first of the problems that needs to be corrected when an organization gets really serious about insights and analytics. Are there questions we're asking right now that are just not that important? They're really telling us how great we were. It's a pat on the back. It's the reason you might get promoted next quarter. It's the reason you won't get your budget cut and all that sort of stuff. Is that, there are performance metrics attached to it, but it is rear view mirror stuff. These things are not telling us what is happening next. And ironically, while I think you said 80%, what would happen if we were 50%? 50% sort of performance metrics and 50% predictive metrics. What would that look like from a innovation potential standpoint if we just balance the budget a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, then it's your Google, Amazon, Apple. Like, that's what they've done. Like, they got ahead of the consumer or their clients or whoever they're serving to create economic value. It's because they anticipated, like, that power of anticipation. So that, to me, that shift is the key to unlocking the value of your two most valuable assets, your people and your data. And I would say, though, that you can't just flip the switch and say, okay, hey, now we're doing just predictive stuff. I remember like trying that early in my career. And at US Bank, I learned quickly that, it's a continuum. Like, there's a journey. The way you build the trust is to kick ass at delivering on the descriptive, on what's happening now, what has happened, earn that trust, and then show people what's possible with the predictive. We all get this, watching this. We understand the power of this. Other people they just can't, other than like, we need analytics or AI machine learning. There's no double click. They're like, well, I don't know why we really need that. I mean, there's so much about like the learning curve that you can bring someone on in the journey, but it is a process. It's not like, hey, we're just doing predictive. Like, you have to earn the trust. Back to your point, Derek, and Eric, your point on that shift to be able to get there.
So Teresa from our audience, and Teresa, I would love it if you joined as an interlocutor here during Unspeakable. So let us know if you want to do that. But she asked the question, can we hear some more examples of the wrong versus right questions? And just to give that a little bit of direction, maybe you can talk about, anonymously, of course, clients you were working with that going into the pandemic had a whole bunch of questions that just wouldn't matter for a while. Maybe they'll matter again, but if you're an airline and a pandemic hits, you've got a set of questions you're not asking, and another set, which is much larger, that you are asking, which will not be relevant for how at least your next 6 months is going to unfold, and maybe your next 6 years. But maybe the pandemic is such a really interesting, I won't call it a black swan because it was 100% certain that this would happen. We didn't know when, and we didn't really understand what the impact might be. But maybe you can use the pandemic as a lens to answer Teresa's question.
That's a great, Teresa, appreciate your question, and Eric, your ability to articulate so perfectly, like exactly what the issue is and how it relates to the pandemic. So to me, the three questions that matter the most, what are we doing and why, in service of what, and what if? And that what if question, you should have at least 5% of your team's capacity thinking about the known unknowns, the inevitable surprises, I think Christensen called them. Like, this stuff, like, to your point, it was going to happen. Like, not to say you spend half your team's time on it, but like, have a playbook of a couple pages as to what you're going to do. Like, what happens if? And I think through some of our clients, we do a lot of work in retail. One of our retail clients during the pandemic, 3,000 locations, they met their shift to digital goals that were supposed to happen in 5 years in 5 months. So, and they made it. And because they were able to execute it, they've captured market share, and they're actually one of the darlings of Wall Street now, with a stock that went from 6 to 300. I think it's come down, maybe a little bit out of the stratosphere, but they thought about that, and they were very intentionally focused on digital. So they had a bit of a playbook. It wasn't great, and they built it as they went with a lot of great leadership, but they had a little bit of a head start, and other people just were like, oh my gosh, spending months trying to figure out what to do. And by then, the customer's gone. So just ask what if. What are the 2 or 3 most, likely or even just semi-plausible scenarios that would have a material shift on your business? What are the competitors that are out there that are starting to eat your market share? Just asking a lot of those questions that have more of an outside-in focus versus the internal inside-out can help discover what some of those questions are.
Well, your answer convinced Teresa to join as interlocutor in the second half.
Awesome.
So you'll be meeting her here in a few minutes.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, we have a series of questions. We call them the Neparata stock questions that relate to employees, customers, competitors, and they tend to be pretty basic questions that most companies don't have a good answer to. One of the most obvious questions is how many customers do you have today? Everyone thinks they know that answer, but most don't. And it's because the data is everywhere. So like just the ability to simplify and focus some of the key questions. And this also, it gets down to a practical kind of tactical level for an analytics or insights function. What should we do our work on? Most likely you can script out 60 to 70% of what questions are coming because they've been asked by the same executive every quarter for the last 3 years. Get ready, like surprise the heck out of him or her with a anticipatory move. Hey, I know here's the report. Wow, how did you guys know I was gonna ask this? Well, because you've asked it for 11 quarters in a row. Usually this week 3, right? It's like a lot of this stuff, it's all driven by, business rhythm. So there's a lot you can just anticipate, and then you look like a hero even, and you're just paying. I think like everyone calls it an analytics officer or chief data officer or whatever, head of strategy. Like the role to me, it's a CPAO, a chief paying attention officer. Like just pay attention. So much of this is knowable and there. Just be curious and you'll nail it.
Love it.
Bill, when you were at Best Buy, and I think maybe I'm not alone when I look at Best Buy, you spent a lot of time there. You built a program known as the VOCE, and I might be mispronouncing that, but the voice of the customer through the employee. When you think about how many companies, the Amazons of the world, obviously that's a short list, have put out of business, that's a much longer list. And the fact that Best Buy continues to grind it out, and it's rumored that Best Buy is Amazon's showroom. You hear that regularly, and I don't know how often I hear it anymore, but what do you think about the program that you put in place through the voice of the customer through the employee, and where is there opportunity to do that regardless of sector or industry influence? Obviously Best Buy is set up for that with a retail storefront, but where might companies be a little short-sighted, even those that don't have a retail storefront, to create something similar?
Awesome, Derek. Great question. So you may recall back in the 2011, 12 timeframe, Business Week put a cover. It was Best Buy, and it had Best Buy logos in a graveyard, and it was just like we were almost dead. I mean, and we were getting our butts kicked. And I think there were many factors. The business teams in particular, we had a small but I think helpful role in that around VOCE. So 2 things: VOCE, I'll talk about more in a second, as well as Athena, which was our basically a CDP platform before people knew what those were. And Hugh Bergely, you came in and led the transformation called Athena, the key to Best Buy's transformation. So Scott Friesen and our analytics team doing that work, Steve Boleyn and Danielle Snook on the VOCE side doing the work of understanding the employee. Both of those were critical because we were learning more about our customer, but we were also realizing that, who knows more about the customer than the people who talk to them every day? Nobody, right? Like, at least from a retailer now with the shift to digital, that's obviously you need to understand how to mine digital interaction with customers. But, at that time in particular, most of our volume was coming through the stores, and we just went out and we built a very, kind of spit and baling wire, whatever the phrase is, $32,000 app that we put in a district. And we basically just got insights from store employees with the question, what have you seen, heard, or learned about your customer today? Open-ended. And people would put some stuff in, and it started scaling. So we ended up getting over 2.5 million insights, I think it was, in 18 months. The next best effort to tap into employee insights generated over around 30,000. So it just was off the charts. And the reason it worked is because it was field led. Danielle, store GM at the time in that region, was telling her peers about it, not us, not the analytics team. We were just enabling it, but they were leading it. And it's credit to Steve Lean and change management. One of my former colleagues is awesome at making this stuff happen. That was the secret sauce. Like the field led it, they told their peers about it. People started using it. We saw a 10 percentage point increase in customer sat. It was like 85 to 95 or something for those stores. And we're talking, hundreds of stores. And employee engagement scores went up from like 3.9 to 4.2 on a 5-point scale. So very material impact. And you could prove the business impact from listening to your employees. What a shocking concept.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Just barely shocking.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. It feels to me like that question. What have you seen, heard or learned about your customer, that feels like it's industry agnostic, and it doesn't truly matter all that much. If you got a retail storefront or if you don't. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Like, you could ask that question, and it's different than the employee engagement type stuff, which is also incredibly important. Like, how do you increase the relationship you have with your employee base? This is more about using or not using. It's about asking the employee to share what they're seeing, learning, or hearing about their customer today with the company. And they want to help. Not everyone, and it's totally voluntary. There's no expectation. Like, this is just like if you have 30 seconds and see something you want to share. And it was very tactical stuff, like, why do we have our headphones in multiple aisles? Why do we have an HH Gregg truck dropping our supplies off in the back? That was a competitor at the time. It was just the truck that went to multiple stores. They just had an HH Gregg logo. It's like, well, no, they really shouldn't. It makes it look like, why is one store loading up Best Buy? Is Best Buy going to be around? Of course, but it looked like it wasn't. So just silly stuff and it's not that the center doesn't want to know this stuff. They wanted to know. And what helped this really scale, another piece, was letting the senior executives ask a question to the field and getting, like typically be like, the store leader would, the head of stores would go into 3 stores and say, oh my gosh, all of 1,100 stores are having this issue or have this opportunity because I talked to 3 people. No, it's 3 people. But when you get a response and 300 GMs say something, then you can pay attention.
Interesting.
And
Really
there's
interesting
so
stuff.
many better tools now. Like you could use Yammer, or there's probably we haven't done as much work in the employee insight space as of late because the customer stuff's been crazy busy. But there's so many good tools you can use off the shelf, either to help your clients or if you're on the business side, just to just use it internally just to get ideas. But the key is to make sure that you're really doing it for them, in service of them and their needs, not vice versa.
Eric, before we pivot, got a final question for Bill before we?
Well, I'll just sort of avatar Jonathan's question from the chat. I'm curious on what you see as perhaps the 2 to 3 biggest opportunities for firms based on what you're seeing today. What trends, issues, and opportunities do you see in common? And Jonathan, we have 1 slot left open for interlocutor for Unspeakable. So raise your hand if you want to join in that role, and he'll be all yours for 10 minutes at that point, buddy. So response to that, and then we've got about 4 minutes before we cut the live stream folks loose. So I'll cut you off when we're.
Yeah, I think the shift to digital and the ability to have a seamless client or customer experience across all channels is a huge opportunity still. People have now, with COVID, like, everyone went to digital. Now they're going back in. They're maybe shopping in a store, going to a hotel, or talking to their financial advisor, and those experiences have to be good. I feel like people got a couple years of a break to get their non-digital stuff right, and now they need to be ready now. Hopefully they were planning throughout that process that people wouldn't just be digital forever. We still like to talk to people in person, not everybody, but enough consumers to matter. So I think that's 1. 2 is I call scale personalization, like just the ability to scale personalization. So not having a segment of, if you have 2 million customers, of 2 million segments, but maybe you have 32 segments of which you get 80% of the differences across the 2 million people, and you can actually operationalize and scale personalization. And I do think AI and machine learning techniques, when we say AI, I think about augmented, not artificial intelligence, because it should be mostly about still enabling a human decision maker. I still think the pure AI stuff is a very small percent of it. It's a big opportunity. And what we're seeing actually down here at Gartner is a lot of companies that are doing a good job of building in some of the what if analysis, the sense making, the kind of iteration and riffing up front in their AI platforms are proving to be more valuable AI platforms because they're asking the right questions early on, and they're allowing models to be built over thousands of models, of which you use 2, versus like, let's spend 7 months building 1 model that may or may not work. Totally different approach. So those are the 3 I see as big opportunities for companies today.
Derek, why don't you take us home on Unthinkable, and we're going to say das vidanya to the robot nets from YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all those places. We're going to cut you guys off here in 1 second. This is your last chance to register to join the bridge for Unspeakable. We're going to leave that up for just a second, and then when I shut that down, we're going to give the POAP 1 more second for the folks who did bother to register and come over. Derek, why don't you take us out of Unthinkable and into Unspeakable? I'll do the rest in the background.
I mean, I think I would just say, couldn't agree with you more. That the AI term, artificial, should be augmented, and a lot of people get it wrong. Like that if you try to automate and create true tech-enabled artificial intel and remove the human element of it, I think you're missing a giant opportunity.
Totally, 100%.
Eric, as we think about the next 25 minutes, reminder, Bill's got a hard stop at 12:55. So I would suggest we go about 8 minutes on our interlocutors today. And do we have Terry
by the way?
first?
This is very cool. Hey, Terry.
Hi there.
Good to see you.
I